Jailbreaks, Submarines, a gold-plated AK-47, El Chapo's trial will tell an epic tale. Even as the Mexican police jet started its descent into Long Island, Joaquín Guzmán Loera had no idea where he was going. All he knew was that hours earlier, he had been whisked from a prison in Ciudad Juárez and put aboard the plane. But as an airport glimmered on the ground outside his window, Mr. Guzmán, shackled, handcuffed and in the care of two American law enforcement agents, anxiously asked where he was taken, according to a person briefed on the trip. One of the Americans answered him in Spanish. "Bienvenido a New York," he said. It was nearly 2 years ago that Mr. Guzmán, the infamous drug lord known as El Chapo, was extradited from Mexico and flown across the border, ending one of the century's most notorious criminal careers. As the longtime leader of the Sinaloa drug cartel, he wore many guises: the savvy smuggler who packed cocaine in cans of gelatinous, the brutal killer said to have shot up a Puerto Vallarta nightclub, and the folklore hero who twice escaped from prison. But this week, after decades of eluding officials in his homeland, where he was convicted in 1993 on drug and homicide charges, the legendary kingpin will finally go on trial in a United States court. At the trial, which is scheduled to start Tuesday in Federal District Court in Brooklyn, the government will attempt to portray Mr. Guzmán as an underworld executive whose sprawling empire routinely trafficked tons of heroin, cocaine and marijuana across 4 continents in an ever-changing fleet of trucks, planes, fishing boats and submarines. With evidence that includes drug ledgers, satellite photos and secretly recorded audio tapes, prosecutors plan to argue that during his more than 20 years in business, Mr. Guzmán, now 59, raked in $14 billion in illicit profits, a fortune he protected with a vast payroll of corrupt officials and an army of professional assassins. The trial will be a watershed moment in America's war on drugs and in the fraught relationship between the United States and Mexico. Leaders of cartels in Mexico have enormous resources to bribe and terrorize local law enforcement. Mr. Guzmán, using bribes, previously escaped from prison in 2001 and 2015. His extradition after his arrest in Mexico in early 2016 required almost a year of hard-fought appeals. But the trial in New York, which prosecutors say could last up to 4 months, will be more than a mere legal battle. It will allow the government to tell the epic tale of Mr. Guzmán's remarkable life story. Numerous rivals, allies and underlings, along with cartel experts and law enforcement officers, are expected to recount how Mr. Guzmán rose from a poor teenage laborer who got his start in crime by farming marijuana in rural Sinaloa to become the Al Capone of the international drug trade who Forbes magazine once placed on its annual list of billionaires. It is a testament to the scope of Mr. Guzmán's operation that before his extradition he was already under indictment in 6 separate federal judicial districts, among them San Diego, Miami, Chicago, and El Paso. This trial will be held in Brooklyn on the orders of Loretta Lynch, the former United States Attorney General who also once served as Brooklyn's top federal prosecutor. The Brooklyn indictment, originally filed in 2009, stems from a series of obscure contract killings that occurred in New York in the early 1990s, according to 3 current and former law enforcement officials. Federal agents investigating the contract killings tied them a Colombian trafficker from the Norte Vale drug cartel, Juan Carlos Ramirez Abadia, known as Chupita, Spanish slang for lollipop. Despite altering his face with plastic surgery, Mr. Ramirez was arrested in Brazil in 2007, in the company of his bodybuilder lover, and was sent to Brooklyn where his case was handled by some of the same prosecutors who will be trying Mr. Guzmán. Mr. Ramirez later became a government informant, helping the authorities prosecute Alfredo Beltran Leyva, one of Mr. Guzmán's closest allies. Mr. Ramirez may also appear as a witness at the Guzmán trial. Indeed, as part of their case, prosecutors are expected to present a thumbnail history of the Latin American drug trade and will show how Mr. Guzmán worked hand-in-hand with the Colombian cartels throughout the 1990s. But within a decade, the government has said, the Colombians abandoned their American distribution routes as the country passed new extradition laws that put traffickers at risk for prosecution in the United States.